cell phones or put them on vibrate, but Gary's not here. So.
Shouldn't be too bad. Usually they finish these up. There's a smaller script tonight. Mine is supposed to be at home with some extra wings. That's true.
Missed you.
Restricted does not last very much.
Friday we're doing pizza.
Oh, yeah? You should sneak in.
What box is that?
Oh, yeah? Oh, 20. Okay. 15? Oh,
Okay,
How big?
Do you want me to introduce you? Or you want to introduce yourself?
I'm not sure who I am. Introduce me, please.
Stan, Super Stan, StanR@theSloop.org, is going to talk about Seahorse today. And then later we can have a general talk, and then we can let James talk. So, take it away, Stan.
Okay, this is about Seahorse, the GNOME Mate password encryption manager. We're going to start this train wreck. Okay. It's there's a definition from Wikipedia. It talks about being a front end to for managing PGP and SSH keys, and there's a bunch of other things. And it integrates with all this magic stuff. It has a lot of things there. It deals with the PGP and which is free and under GPL, and that's a kind of a nice definition and so forth. Come on. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to do a couple things. Why I looked at it, what I found, the availability, installation, documentation, starting it, and the built-in help for it, and using the built-in help, which is, I think is called Yelp, something under GNOME, whatever. And some references, and then we'll get into any questions. You can, of course, ask questions as we go along. And the reason I found this, I was looking at this page on the free software, free FSF site about email self-defense, a guide to fighting surveillance using encrypted mail. I looked at that. They have a really nice introduction on how to install stuff on all across the major platforms: Linux, Windows, Macintosh, Apple, whatever you call those OS 10 things. But many of those terms and concepts were only vaguely familiar to me because I just read about them all the time and haven't really done anything with it. I've been pretty uncomfortable with the whole process. Although that page on the FSF site, Free Software Foundation site, looks pretty easy. I wanted to understand a little bit better, and so I dived into looking around for things, and I found this Enigma Mail interface. And I'm not going to cover the Seahorse in real depth, other than how to get into it and some of the features that it has, because I still don't understand all that stuff. I'm just kind of using this as a learning tool for me to supplement what I see other places. My knowledge on this is limited, and I deal only with the Linux installations because I'm cheap. I don't have money to burn. I don't buy OS 10. I don't buy Windows 8.1.6, whatever it is. It's not going to be anything detailed or thorough on this. And like I said, I use Linux. My distro of choice currently is the Linux Mint Debian edition. I sometimes use the Linux Mint 17, the long-term solution based on the Ubuntu, which is based on the Debian. And I often experiment with many other distros. I generally download two or three a month and look at them and see what else is going on, what's available. My desktop environment of choice is Mate, or Mate as I like to call it, which is a fork of the GNOME 2 series, because I'm traditional and I tend to use things that I remember where they are, and I found the GNOME 3 just blew my mind away, as did the Unity stuff. So Mate is my choice whenever it's available. And Seahorse doesn't seem to be installed by default. It's really a package for the GNOME desktop environments, which, since Mate is a clone of that, it will run. So you're probably going to have to install it. So I installed it from the Linux Mint Debian edition or 17 repository. It's appropriate on whichever machine I was using it on. And the version's different. They got a bunch of strange numbers and size and everything, but that's normal. It does not. One of the weird things, like after the installation, they don't. It doesn't immediately appear in the menu system, which can throw new users for a loop and throw me for a loop. Sometimes you have to. I found on a few things you have to log out, log back in. Sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times. Depends on the application, and that's more, I think, a limitation of the Mate fork than it is of anything else. Documentation, well, once you get it installed, if you do a what is, gives you that line, Seahorse. It just says password key. It really doesn't tell you too much. Here's a man page. Once you get installed, you do a man Seahorse. And most of the man page is just this, the description and so forth, and so forth. What else is up there is mostly the same kind of stuff you get when you're on the help on the command line. And if I execute Seahorse --help, you get the usage. And this is more or less what's on the rest of that man page. Okay, it just talks about help and help all. And I found this really interesting thing here. There's a display that's for executing it and having it come up in the GUI. Okay, so I executed with other options. Let's see, let me change the clip here. Whoa, magic. There we go. But, so I ran this, I found this display entry right there, and I played around with that. I've forgotten everything I've read about the X Windows system on the Xman page. Finally fooled around and did this -- display equals the $display and submitted it, and it came up. And that's a messy way to do that, because then you see all the little error messages that they didn't clean up when they built this thing. So that's kind of nasty. Anyway, so what you want to do is you want to run it from the GUI, from the menu system. And what the heck? And then when it comes up in the menu system, and in this case I was using the Linux Mint Debian edition, and it's the same on the pretty much the same on the Linux Mint 17. It's not named as Seahorse. They name it password and keys. I guess that's for the dumb users like me that don't know what it is. You choose it from the menu, either all, and you go down and find password and keys, or you say preferences, go down and find password and keys. It's subtitled manage your password and encryption keys. That's kind of nice, I guess. Anyway, you've got built-in help, and it's pretty extensive documentation. There's some eccentricities, but there's no help for the help, which I find is kind of weird. Let me go to the next screen here. It's not the help system on Linux Mint is not introduced in your official user guide. And I kind of stumbled upon it because I noticed I'd gone up to the where did I go? I went up to the GNOME site and was following where they had their icons. And I ran across a very familiar icon, which I noticed down at the bottom. I'll bring the panel back, pull it around in there, and if you do something, sometimes it will pop up a little thing, and there's a help. That icon was pretty familiar. I'd seen that before. Okay, well, you do help. Next screen. Okay, time for live demo. I'm going to go command line. And I'm going to, you can do it from the GUI, or you can do it from the command line. Probably work better if I spell it right. I have to be root. Doesn't take long. Pull down a few other things. I didn't have it installed on this particular machine, which is good, because I would have had to spend another 5 minutes uninstalling it to then install it to show this process. You can do it from the Synaptic graphical user interface. Go in and do a search for Seahorse and mark it and pull it down. It works fine. But anyway, going back, put another window here. I pop up the menu. Come on, be nice. Go all applications. If you go down and look. Oh, it happened to be, doesn't always show up, but
Right there, the next one. Yep.
works fine. Password and keys,
Mm-hmm.
bring it right up. And some of the earlier versions had quite a bit of problem doing that. This is the thing you get when you come right in. It's very plain little menu. You go to help. There's that funny little help button again, little lifesaver. Pulls it up, loads the documentation. It pops right into this introduction page. Okay. The previous page on that is more of an outline. Password and key manual. That's different areas and so forth. And nowhere in this thing does it talk about Seahorse until it gets right down to the very last section. It says Seahorse is a collection of stuff known as Seahorse, preferences and applets and all that kind of stuff. It's got its own web page and pretty nice. Go back to the previous. Okay, let's go again. Pull back the introduction. Anyway, like I said, there are a number of sections here, quite detailed. Go through them. It covers the creating of the PGP keys and the SSH keys. Now, I'm pretty familiar with SSH because I've been using it for a while, and I will recall that we had in this organization, about 6 demonstrations of SSH before it finally clicked in my head on how to use the darn thing. But I mean, I used about 2 or 3 different patterns, and that's all I really used to connect this stuff. And now that I've been using it, things make a lot more sense. And this tool is used apparently for collecting all kinds of keys. That's about as much as I know about it. And it's got some fairly good documentation. Some of the best I've seen on an application in a long time. It goes into great detail of creating the keys and so forth. I have experimented with it a little bit, and I have created keys on one machine. I don't know how I did it. It just kind of loaded Seahorse, and they showed up. Where and when did I create those keys? I have no idea. Okay. So, like I said, the reason I went into this stuff was to use this as an additional resource to help me understand a lot of the other things that are going on. Okay. Now, one of the interesting things, an aside of throw out here, you go in and load all documents right here, that thing right there. This pulls up the links to all the other known documentations that this package will get you to. And on an earlier version of Linux Mint, I think on 13, there was somewhere in there was a little icon that talked about help, and it got you to this point. That was when they were still using the GNOME, I believe. And they just have not added it in yet. They haven't put it in the official manual or whatever. But now it's in here. You know, it's got passwords and key names, okay? And it's got other stuff, scanners. And I find that this documentation is very extensive. It's very detailed, and it goes into a lot of things. Anyway, but there's no help on getting the help. That's why I put that in earlier. Anyway, it's got the normal entries here for importing and creating new items, page preferences, remote, view. I find that the view, if you add this point right here, then it adds this thing, and these options have some relation to what you're adding, and so at this point I'm just exploring what this thing does. Okay. It looks like it's going to be a very useful tool, and that's the extent of what I wanted to cover today.
Woohoo!
Yay!
So thank you, Super Stan. While we get James here set up to do his Ansible talk, we can have some general discussion. I know Gary wanted to talk about miscellaneous patent anniversaries of coin-operated phones, but yeah, we can skip past that.
I will later on put this PDF up on the website. It's got the links on the last page for references. Anybody interested in following along where I'm exploring. Down here. In between the sessions, we usually have announcements, questions and answers.
Questions and answers.
Okay. Any announcements before we go any further?
I wanted to say that Gary suggested we give Stan a hand, and I believe we did.
Yay. Oh, that kind of hand. Okay.
Handing out the door.
So does anyone have any fun news of the day or otherwise general announcements? Do you want to break something, fix something today?
I broke the screen on my laptop.
That one or
No, not that one. The good one.
You're crying then, aren't you?
Yeah, really. I mean, I busted
So
it.
if anyone has any extra money that would like to donate for Stan's new laptop fund, please see. It looks like Don brought the lockbox. So
Yep. Here's the lockbox. Here you are, Stan.
I hope there's.
Stan, this is yours.
Yeah.
is it full of money?
No,
I don't know. I didn't open it.
I didn't. It can't be full of money because I didn't have any.
That's where you keep the blackmail. Got it.
It's all gone. Anyway,
So I'm going to talk for a little bit and get everybody and just grab the connection from Stan.
next.
Okay, it's in the lid of the container right here. So, any other fun topics of today? Any questions or answers? Things that people have broken? David, what do you got?
Question for you. You came up with this, or you showed me
Okay.
the Google Drive,
Okay.
and I think it's pretty cool. It's worked pretty good. I've been so used to using rsync that I was trying G-Sync, and G-Sync not really working well with CentOS 6.5. In fact, I have trouble even getting it to work at all. So my way has been to rsync it up and then delete the other one, which is terrible.
Yeah. So yeah, Google Drive support in Linux has been pretty horrendous, and I don't know. Has anyone here got it working? Yes, no, maybe, Adam.
I can't remember whether it was Google Drive or Dropbox One. I think it's Google Drive. There's a plugin you can buy. It's like eBooks, and it works
So
okay.
yeah, there's several Fuse, which is file system and user space. There's several Fuse drivers that will let you use it. They work to varying levels and various levels of support. CentOS 6.5 is getting a little dated with a long in tooth, so maybe it's just a library issue. And yeah, I don't really use it in that fashion. I have a Chromebook and a Chromebox that I use for all that type of work, and then I SSH into everything else. I don't really need Google Drive on a server in any way, shape, or form, so that really hasn't happened. I know Grive, G-R-I-V, is the main
That one has a
solution.
little problem. It gets lost.
It gets lost.
Well, it does something weird with the directories when it looks at it. It gets all screwed up, and it just throws its hand up and nothing happens. Anyway, I just thought I'd ask it.
Well, no.
Actually, I'm working with it, trying to get it to go. I don't use it as a server. I use rsync and regular drive. But I'm trying to move a lot of my regular files out in the cloud, and I like the B drive. It seems to work fine for things that I don't update on. That's the problem. When I have to update them, it doesn't really work easily. The only way I can do it is put a file in, gets the same name, and then delete the one with the older date. That doesn't work.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Anyone else need help fixing some major problem? Any job openings that sound good?
Somebody called me today about job openings,
Really?
but he didn't send an email.
Anybody here in the Army Reserve? They've got about 5 or 6 positions in DC, and you have to be a captain. You might want to go up there. I wouldn't go up there unless I'm at least 7 or above. That just opened up. But, on the job.
So are you going to go back to work, Stan?
Oh, they can't call me back.
They can't?
They cannot.
Yeah.
They cannot call me back unless there's an actual declaration of war.
Or an act of Congress.
Or an act of Congress, yes.
Whichever happens last, or
Yeah.
first.
We have military advisors in Iraq.
Yeah. They don't want a retired old fart like me, though.
Haven't
You have to
we
worry
been in
about
a
it
perpetual
next
war on terror?
And drugs
Yeah.
and poverty.
I used to know the guy that was highly involved with writing the regulations, and after he died, everything changed.
So,
If there's nothing else anybody wants to talk about, we'll let James hit the floor right on time, and you can wow and dazzle. So James is going to talk about Ansible.
So obviously with Ansible, I'm going here. So about me, I'm proud father of twin boys. They're about 1.5 years, coming up on 1.5 years. It's a complete St. Louis native. Never really lived anywhere else. Graduated from University of Missouri Rolla. Lived here all my life. Previously worked at Savvis, now CenturyLink. I was doing some other stuff for their cloud thing they're starting up now, Savvis Direct, if you've heard about it. Scott Trade worked there for 3.5 years. Been a long time open source contributor. Pretty much been running Linux on my home system since about 2005. Haven't run anything since. Started with OpenSUSE, then went to Ubuntu. Currently on Fedora. Started contributing to the Cobbler project. If anybody's ever heard of that, it's kind of something for kickstarting bare metal servers. It automates the Red Hat Kickstart process. It also grew to do the Ubuntu Debian pre-seed system. For a while, we were flirting with doing Solaris support for Jumpstart. Didn't really work all that well. It's hard template files live that have to sit on NFS. 2010, I actually became the leader of the project. The current leaders at Red Hat kind of letting it die, and they were leaving, so I took over. Been the main maintainer of that since 2010. Michael DeHaan, he started Cobbler when he was at Red Hat as a Fedora project. He later started the Ansible project. That's where he knew me from, asked me to join the company, so I've been working there for just over a year. So Ansible statistics and information. Like I said, about 2.5 years old. Started it in 2012. He was at Cisco at the time, so he was looking for something else. Wasn't real happy at Cisco. There is a company behind Ansible, Ansible Incorporated. Previously, shortly was Ansible Works, if you've heard that name. They changed the name to just Ansible about 6 months ago. Red Hat, a bunch of Red Hat guys, so that's mainly out of Raleigh, Durham. That's where Red Hat headquarters are, if you're not too familiar, in the Triangle Research Park. Currently about 30 employees in Durham, that's where the office is. That's the nice outside. It's in the American Tobacco campus. It's a nice old campus, so, where all the American Tobacco Company was. They turned it into a nice business park now. It's really pretty cool. We have an enterprise product. Don't really call us open core because Tower is something that sits completely outside of Ansible. The core product is completely open source, always will be. Tower adds on a GUI, a nice GUI for it, role-based access controls. If you have a large number of teams that are only allowed to do certain things on certain servers, and it provides a REST API so you can integrate it with other things. So you can have other services talking to Tower via REST API. GitHub, we get a lot of traffic on GitHub. We're currently the number 4th most worked Python project on GitHub, and the number 6th most starred Python project. We have 839 contributors in just over 2.5 years. The release we just did about a week and a half ago, 1.7, had 200 contributors to it. Not unique, obviously. They've been contributing for a while, but 200 people put code into that release. So very, very busy. In 2013, we were the 5th most contributors on all of GitHub. And only a few projects beat us out, and they are all very, very big and well-used projects like Angular and Rails. I haven't used CocoaPods. I'm not I believe that's a Mac thing. I'm not a Mac person. Same with Homebrew. Yeah, Homebrew is. CocoaPods, JavaScript, or CoffeeScript, I forget what it is. Some of our users, Twitter, they've been using us. They gave a really cool presentation at our, did an Ansible Fest a few months ago up in New York. And they gave a really cool speech about how they're using Ansible internally to manage some of their servers. edX, they're one of the big online course. Them and Coursera are like the 2 biggest ones right now. They do like all the online education stuff. Fedora just pretty much ditched Puppet and is now going with Ansible for all of their internal infrastructure needs. They are completely moving everything over to Ansible. Rackspace, probably one of our larger users, like it says there, they have all their little zones of OpenStack servers that they serve their cloud on, and they use us to do the rolling upgrades across all their data centers, touch about 5,000 servers per zone at a time, and get it all rolled out in about 10 minutes now with Ansible. It's really crazy how they do it. Docker Media, big users of us. That's where Ansible Fest was, I believe. It was in their building in New York. They integrate with us through Jenkins to do continuous integration, continuous deployment, do it many, many times an hour. And then just a few others. You can go to our website and see how many people are out there using Ansible, but it is quite a few. So what is Ansible? It's all about automation, automating everything. Configuration management. Are people out here using configuration management for anything? CF Engine, Puppet, Chef, Salt, whatever have you. If you've got anything more than a handful of servers, you really should be using configuration management. It makes things much, much easier. Application deployment. So a lot of people were starting with configuration management, something like Puppet, and then realized it's, yeah, I've got this system, I can do something with it now, but those systems, first generation. If you've ever seen this video, it's Lego Mindstorms. These guys made this huge assembly. It goes all the way around the room, and you can see all the little basketballs and soccer balls, and just like a Rube Goldberg machine going around the room. It's really cool if you look it up on YouTube. Cloud provisioning, everybody uses blah blah cloud, yeah. But right now, Ansible can go out and actually talk to EC2 API, Rackspace, DigitalOcean, a lot of the others, Linode, and stand up servers, you know, all the different services they have. Multi-tier orchestration, continuous deployment, this is what Ansible really excels at. So you've got a tier of web servers, a tier of mid servers, a tier of database servers, and you want to do a rolling upgrade across your entire infrastructure without having any downtime. Ansible is very, very good at doing stuff like this. And finally, ad hoc task execution. It replaces pretty much people have to use cluster SSH, parallel SSH to do the same thing on a whole bunch of servers at once. This Ansible makes it much easier to do that as well. So what makes it different from the others? Some of the things I talked about. No agents. Ansible does everything over SSH. You don't have to install anything on the target server except Python and a handful of libraries that it uses. Simplicity. Very, very simple configuration syntax. Everything, all the configuration files, I'll show you some of them later. It's all YAML. People are familiar with YAML. It's a document syntax. It's pretty easy to understand once you learn it. I admit I hated it when I first had to start dealing with it. Once I learned it, I was like, this is awesome. It's great. It's not all wordy like XML or anything like that. One tool to do everything. Like I said, people were doing configuration management with Puppet, and then they had to go and start using other things like mCollective or some of the other tools to go out and actually go out and deploy applications on your servers. Ansible strives to do everything for you, so you don't have to hop around and have a bunch of different tools that all your admins have to learn. In-order execution. If anybody's ever had to deal with Puppet, they know that I call this the Puppet slide, because Puppet, you sit there, sometimes you run it, it'll change something, you run it, it'll change something else. Its ordering is completely random. There's no guarantees unless you imply very strict ordering, and it's not easy to do. When I was at Scottrade and Savvis, I dealt with Puppet for a combined 4 years. I do not miss it at all. New in 1.7, if you have to deal with Windows, a lot of enterprises do. This is a very requested feature. We have native remote PowerShell support. So you don't have to go out and do a kludge like installing Cygwin SSH on your Windows server to get them to talk to SSH. Just enable remote PowerShelling, and with Ansible's the modules we're coming up with, it all does native remote PowerShelling for you, exactly as it does it with Python. Question?
Does remote PowerShell have it?
Sorry?
Is the transport for remote PowerShell included?
It can be. Right now, that's actually considered, it's in beta. We support HTTP and HTTPS for the transports right now. We're working on adding Kerberos into that, which I think has to do with more the authentication than the transport. But yeah, it's done over at SSL. We're using a library called WinRM, I believe it's called. Python WinRM that does it all over the native Microsoft protocols. So yeah, so it's still considered beta right now. We're still ironing some of the bugs out of it, but it works for a large portion of things. Batteries included, we always say this because there are over 220 modules in core. Modules are what does everything in Ansible. We'll talk about them again more later. But they're the things that say you have the user module, which will go out and create users on your system. Service module will manage services. You have modules for EC2 that will go out and, like I said, talk to all the workers that are what does everything in Ansible. So it's very easy to write your own modules too, as Andrew and I were talking about earlier. So requirements, like I said, need Python 2.6. That's it right now for the managing the controlling node where you're actually running Ansible. You only need to have 2.4 on your remote server, so it works quite well with things going all the way back to like RHEL 4, RHEL 5, and some of the older systems you might have sitting around. Very few libraries required. Some basic concepts. You have an inventory. This can be an INI file, which is an example below. It can also be any executable script that returns JSON. You can also have a lot of mixed types sitting in a directory, and if you point the inventory in a directory, it will read every inventory type that's in there. So you can have a mix of INI files and scripts that talk to remote APIs to, if you have a CMDB that has all your servers in it, you can basically write your own inventory script to interface with it and have all your inventory centralized. Modules, like I said, they're the workhorses. They do everything. They interact with remote APIs. Anything you can pretty much write Python to talk to, you can write a module for it. Or not even Python. You can write modules actually in any language you want. You can write them in Java or Perl or PHP. God help you if you do, but if you don't want to. I had to deal with it too long. So yeah, basically just has to output JSON. It can, whatever can accept, we can send basically key equals value pairs of arguments to it, or we can send, it can receive JSON as the input to the module. It just has to return JSON for the output. Just a couple of examples of the ones there below. The pink one. EC2 is the one that will go out and create instances in the same cloud. Lookup plugins are something which can go out and retrieve data from external sources this way. For one of the example lookup plugins I've got there is just to get environment variables for you. Basically, there's another one that people use a lot called the pipe lookup. It will actually go out, it's kind of like a shell command. It just executes a shell command and returns the data as a variable. People used to use that a lot to go out and talk to external password databases. Don't really do that very much anymore. I'll talk about that later, but that's what lookup plugins used to use a lot for. So plays and playbooks. Playbooks are basically what we call files to contain all of your actions, what you want to do. Inside that playbook, you can have one or more plays. So this is an example playbook. This is where you list. So web servers is a group that's listed in your inventory. It could be a single host, telling it to gather facts. If you're familiar with other configuration management systems like Puppet, they have something called Factor. So it can tell you things like Ansible does this on its own. You don't have to have Factor installed. But it'll tell you like how many CPUs are on the system, how much memory is on the system. Basically all that information about your system that you might want to use. Say you're setting up a database server and you want to base, the in-memory cache on how much memory you have. You can do that with facts on the system. So vars, you can configure vars inside that. You can also have external variables or point this. So we have another directive called vars files, so you can have your variables and files. Something you might want to do with your facts is one of the variables is Ansible_distribution. You can then say I want to include facts-Ansible distribution, and it will go in and pull facts for that kind of distribution. So you can have a generic playbook for Fedora or Ubuntu, and say you're installing some packages. HTTP is HTTP on RHEL systems. It's Apache 2 on Ubuntu systems. So you can kind of make things generic that way. Then you have your tasks list, which is you go out and do something. Calling, that's the name, that's the actual module that's being run, and then for this one, I'm saying I want to notify this handler. Handlers are something that gets triggered at the end of the run that's saying, okay, I updated this configuration file. I notify, I want to actually restart this Apache service because I updated my httpd.conf. And then you just run it with the Ansible-playbook command. The syntax, like we said, we try and keep it very simple. One of the main reasons we reject code coming into the system is people trying to do overly complex language things or trying to add too much language to it to make it very complex. We try and keep the language syntax from becoming a programming language. Roles, that's just a way of packaging up a whole bunch of things like files and templates that you might want to push out, your variable files, lists and tasks and handlers that are going to be going out. So roles, they're very similar to Puppet modules, kind of. I think that's been a while now since I've used Puppet, but yeah. So, like I said, the defaults are variables that have very low precedence, can be overridden very easily. Files, handlers, metadata is something. In metadata, you can actually specify this role has a dependency on this other role. So it will actually go out and run that dependent role first. It's like package dependencies. Tasks, template, and vars files.
What are handlers? Handlers, what are handlers?
Handlers, they're the things that you can trigger essentially via notification. They're so if you, I mentioned it earlier, if you have like say you deploy a new http.conf as a template, you then notify your restart Apache handler, and at the end, after it's done doing everything, it will then start running all the handlers that were triggered when the rest of the playbook was running, and it will go out and do things like restart Apache or one of the things, like I said, I'll show you the multi-tier example we do, and you can have it go out and take the server out of a load balancer, and then at the end you put it back in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
And anybody, if you have anybody ask questions, feel free to interrupt me if I'm going too fast or you want to clarify it. So this is the rolling update. Bit more complex, shows some of the more language syntax that isn't used very often except specifically in this kind of situation. So these get run before anything else happens. These get run after, obviously. The serial means only operate on 5 servers at a time. So if you have 100 web servers, with this rolling example, it would go out and operate on 5 of them at a time only. If it failed on those 5, it would then stop. So only 5 of your 100 servers would be out of commission. You could then adjust, figure out what the problem is, rerun the playbook. But yeah, so very shows the, oh, this is interesting. So the local action, this means always run it on the system that's running Ansible. You don't actually go out and run it on the remote server. And oh yeah, and then roles here. This is how roles are used. So you just list all of the roles that are going to be run on the server. So a common role, install users, web server installs HTTP, pass in a variable that says I want to run HTTP on 8080. Then deploy your application, then deploy your monitoring stuff. And all of that logic is contained in each role, which can then go out and be reused for other playbooks if you want. You saw some of this, the task file within roles, it looks just like it does in the main playbook. It's just you don't have anything else in there except lists of tasks. If people aren't familiar with YAML, the dash means it's a list. So this is a list of things, and then this is a dictionary of objects. Translates pretty well to Python if people are familiar with Python. Same with the handlers. Ad hoc mode, so this is an example of, say, you just want to go out and do one command on a bunch of servers. This is running ping, which tells you if the server is up or not, if you can connect to it with Ansible normally. You can run any module this way, pass in arguments to it with -a. Ping doesn't take any arguments, so. Ansible Vault came around, I think, in 1.4, 1.5. This allows you to encrypt anything that is a YAML file, so you can have all of your passwords stored in a variable file. And basically, as Ansible's running, if it encounters a vault encrypted file, it'll ask you what's the vault password, and then it'll decrypt it on the fly. It uses Python crypto. So we didn't write our own encryption for it. Python crypto is written by Google, so we trust it. So yeah, so it makes it really easy to have to deal with sensitive passwords that you don't necessarily want to have a bunch of people see. Ansible Galaxy, we came out with this last December actually. It's basically a sharing spot for roles that people have written. If you go out there, you'll see there's about 850 roles as of yesterday when I wrote this slide deck. So you don't want to write your own role, want to reuse what somebody else has done, you can go out and grab an Apache role, a MySQL database installation role. There's a whole bunch of them out there that do all sorts of different things. You don't have to register to use it. You only have to register if you want to add roles or comment or rate on roles that people have used. There's a CLI command for installing roles. It also can create empty role directories for you, so whether you just want to create a role or actually eventually upload it to Galaxy. So yeah, so it's just namespaced with username and then the role name of the user. So that's just contact info there. I forgot to put my email address on there. I can give it to anybody if they have any questions. On IRC quite a bit. I live on IRC, that's where I'm all day, and GitHub. So, questions?
What's the largest usage that you know of?
Rack space is pretty large. I mean,
Any idea how many?
tens of thousands.
So I take it works across multiple network settings.
Yeah, anything
You
you
have a
can reach.
stage, you have like a repository server on
No.
your segment, or I missed that part.
It depends on what you need to do. So for running it, it's SSH. So if you can reach the servers via SSH, you can use Ansible to talk to it. You can even have an SSH tunnel going through some Bastion server or some other way. If you can reach it via SSH, you can manage it with Ansible.
And you can have Ansible run Ansible on a jump host too.
Yeah, you could.
Say that again.
You can have Ansible run Ansible on a jump host.
You could, as an ad hoc command, you could use Ansible to run Ansible playbook on some remote server, which would then go out and talk to it.
How does it compare to something like Ansible or
Like Chef. Specifically, Chef, I think, still does a lot of things out of order. Chef, you have to, the configuration language, you're essentially writing Ruby programming as the programming language, so you have to have a pretty high skill level in your admins to manage it.
But gives you a little more flexibility.
Yes and no. I mean, with Ansible, anything you can write in Python. If you need a custom module, it's really easy to write a custom module to do something else if we specifically don't do it. And we're very open to including it in the core distribution. It just has to follow a couple of other general guidelines for us.
does it follow like a satellite type where you have your server and then you have on each network segment you have your repository?
It depends on how you want to set it up. You can have, you've got multiple data centers and you want to have a specific host only in that data center. Something like you would do with a satellite proxy, that you're kind of talking about.
Right.
You could do that, like Andrew said. You could use Ansible to run Ansible remotely. We do offer a pull mode. There's a command called Ansible-pull that you can set up via cron, and actually you can just point it at a Git repository. We'll download the playbooks you want it to run and then run them. So if you actually want a pool architecture, but Ansible is a push architecture because we don't have any daemons running out there on servers. Does that answer your question?
You want to talk about Tower to that topic?
Sure. Tower is, like I said, it's a very, very nice GUI for things. It can set up jobs based on scheduling. I forgot about that.
You can show us.
I could. I don't have Tower installed on this. I'm the open source side, so I don't use Tower too much myself. Oh, this is something else I wanted to show as well. Our doc site, we're very, very meticulous about our documentation. We try and keep it up to date. Every time we get code updates, we do updates to the documentation, add parameters to modules, anything like that. The module index is here, so this is all of our modules. You just look at it out of the categories, you can see how many there are. Sure. So yeah, I mean, you could go through it and just look at some of the simple ones, like if you just want to do database, you know, Mongo, MySQL, Postgres, Redis. You know, if you're doing messaging, you're using RabbitMQ, monitoring. These are all the kind of some of the cloud monitoring services, and also then obviously some of the oldies like Nagios or Zabbix we support. We have a couple of net infrastructure modules. Like I said at the talk, so SSH, we can talk to it. So we actually have some big IP modules. If you're using F5. So yeah, Tower is. If you want to learn more about it, we've got a really nice introductory video. Only about 12 minutes. You can download it free. I believe you have you can run up to 10 servers off of it for free. After that, it's depending on what you want to pay. There's a couple different support levels. But like I said, I don't
We've
have
got
Tower.
about we've got about an hour and a half if you want to play it.
Sure. You guys want to watch it? How good my audio is.
Where's Bob?
Tower provides, including workflow routines, push-button deployment of Ansible playbooks, and centralized logging of Ansible playbook runs. Let's log into Tower. When we first log into Tower, we'll see the home dashboard here, which provides an overview of all the various Tower objects available to the user, and a quick summary of the successful and failed Ansible job. I'm logged in as the admin user, so I have access to everything configured in this Tower installation. First, let's take a look at how Tower encourages support and collaboration of teams while providing a permissions-based system to manage the access that individual Tower users have to Ansible inventories and to run and deploy playbooks. Ansible Tower provides a complete role-based access control system in the means to define organizations, teams, and users as appropriate to your particular organizational structure. Organizations are at the top level of the hierarchy. Organizations are containers for teams and for users, but also for Ansible inventories and playbooks and form. An organization can contain as many users and teams of users as is required. And any particular user may be granted permissions to control access to Ansible inventories and deployments. Click here to create a permission for this user. We can grant permissions for this individual user to control access to Ansible inventory, for example, by choosing inventory and specifying permissions. You can also grant permissions on deployments or the ability for an Ansible user to run an Ansible playbook. You can select the appropriate Ansible project, permission for, and again the appropriate inventory, and then the permission type of run or check. These permissions can be set on an individual user basis. The Tower also has the capability of aggregating these permissions into teams of users. Create as many teams of users as makes sense for your organization, and each team can be assigned permissions just as users. Teams are also useful to scalably assign ownership of credentials and projects, rather than clicking through the Tower interface multiple times to assign the same credentials to the same user. Those credentials can be shared here at the team level. The second major benefit of Ansible Tower is the ability to push-button deploy an Ansible playbook. This is useful because you can configure a template in Tower to store all of the parameters normally passed to Ansible playbook on the command line, not just the playbook, but the inventory, the credentials, the extra variables, and all of the options and settings specified on the command line. This is done through the job templates interface with Tower. Here I have configured a number of job templates, each corresponding to a playbook, combined with a set of parameters to run that playbook. Note that some of these job templates actually reuse the same exact playbook over and over again, but I'm passing different parameters to run the playbook in different ways, different inventories, different credentials, etc. The job template encourages and supports reuse of Ansible playbook content and collaboration between teams. Let me show you what a job template looks like. We can choose whether to run this as a Java type run or check. When this template is submitted as a job, setting the type to run will execute the playbook, running tasks on split hosts. Setting the type to check will not execute the playbook. Instead, Ansible will check playbook stacks as entirely set up and reported problems. Next, we choose the inventory against which to run this playbook. We can choose from any of the inventories that we have configured already in Tower. Let's take a quick look at what inventories look like in Tower, and then we'll come back to the job template. Here I have a number of inventories configured. These can be arbitrarily named and set up to match your organization and how you have divided up your list. Here I could have inventory set up as development, QA, stage, production, or as I've done here, divided my inventory by one target. Amazon Web Services, Rackspace, and VMware. Each inventory is simply a collection of hosts, the same as an Ansible inventory file. You can group hosts underneath inventories in any way that makes sense for you. Here I have a Rackspace group that is automatically synchronized with Rackspace cloud. You can add hosts manually by IP address or host name. The Tower synchronizes inventory groups also directly from Amazon Web Services EC2 and from the Rackspace cloud using their APIs. Once this is configured, synchronization is as simple as pressing the synchronization button. And here the output shows us that synchronization is successful. And so any hosts that no longer exist in my Rackspace Open Cloud are deleted, and any new hosts that I've launched since my last synchronization will be updated here. I current several hosts of Rackspace groups, web servers, database servers, load balancers, and monitoring systems. These are the groups that my playbook that I'll run expects to deploy in. That's the way the playbook has been written, but any grouping structure is possible in Tower. Once I have these inventories set up, I can use them in job templates. Let's go back to our job template with the land K2 proxy deployment of Rackspace. And so we simply select the appropriate inventory. After selecting our inventory, then we select which Tower project that the link was from. A Tower project is a logical collection of Ansible playbooks because there's an entire repository of playbook control. For this job template, I've chosen the Ansible example project, which I've set up to pull Ansible content directly from the Ansible public repository on GitHub. Let's take a quick peek at how that is done. Ansible playbook content is organized into Tower projects. You can import content into Tower either directly onto the file system using the Ansible command line, or you can import them from a source code management system, including Git, Subversion, or Mercurial, or any source code management system that provides those sorts of interfaces. The Ansible examples project, I'm pulling the Ansible examples repository directly from GitHub, just passing the URL here. This is a public repository, so I don't need any credentials, but I can provide those if necessary. After configuring this repository, Tower can be invoked to update this project from the upstream repo, simply by pressing the synchronization button here. I can also schedule this update to recur periodically. Back to the job template. Once the project is configured and selected here, then this drop-down menu for the playbook will automatically be populated with all of the Ansible playbooks that are found in this project directory and subdirectory. So every Ansible playbook file automatically populated into this menu is available for selection. Now I configure the correct credentials to run Ansible against the host in my selected inventory. Here I've selected a machine credential, as well as a credential for Rackspace, since I am managing systems, in this particular case in the Rackspace Open Cloud. Let's take a look at how credentials are set up. Credentials can be of type machine, cloud, or source code management. Cloud credentials enable Tower to interface directly with cloud providers, including Amazon Web Services and Rackspace Open Cloud. Source code management credentials enable Tower to import projects from on hosts under management. Just like using Ansible on command line, I can specify the SSH username, optionally provide a password, an SSH key password, or even have Tower ask the user for the password at one time. Tower also supports keys and integration with Ansible Vault. It's important to note that these credentials are not retrievable from Tower. Once I've entered a password or key here in this interface, it is encrypted and inserted into the Tower database and cannot be retrieved from Tower. You can grant users the ability to use credentials without actually exposing the credentials. If you have a user move to a different team or leave the organization, you don't necessarily have to rekey all of your systems just because that credential is available in your account. Back to the job template. Once I have the inventory, project, playbook, and credentials configured, I can set up any of these other parameters and options. I can limit the playbook run to a set of inventory hosts and groups, as I've done here. I can also pass extra variables to the playbook. This is very useful for reuse and collaboration. I reuse this same playbook over and over again, but specify different inventories. To handle the differences in systems deployed, for example, Amazon and Rackspace, I can pass different variable values to override defaults. Launching the job template is as simple as clicking the launch button here, or setting up a schedule to run this job in the future. The third major benefit of Ansible Tower is the centralized launch and job history that Tower provides. Like any job, will show you details about the job run, not just the output of the run, but exactly how it was launched. The playbook, inventory, credentials, and all the options used to launch this job. This is important in case the template is changed in the job time. You want to see how this particular job is run at launch time, regardless of any changes that have occurred since then. Standard out shows us the same output when we ran this job with the Ansible command line. Selecting the host summary for the job shows us an overview on a host-by-host basis. Here you can see that the LAMP proxy playbook ran against the 5 hosts that I placed as the playbook failed. You can see the status of running the playbook against each host, as well as the success or failure of each individual task in the playbook. The events view gives us much deeper detail, including information about each and every Ansible task that was run and the results. Again, across all hosts. Here we can see the output of Ansible installing the Apache web server on each of our web servers. I can drill down to get more information about exactly when the task is executed, what module to call, and with what parameter. All of this information can be used to audit the changes deployed to your environment using Ansible Tower. Thank you for viewing this demonstration.
Very high level overview of what Tower can do. If you're interested in seeing it more, definitely look into it. It's very, very handy. thing I forgot to point out here, Ansible works very well across a lot of different OSs. So we have tons of modules for package managers on all those different OSs. So you can see OpenBSD, FreeBSD, Solaris, HPUX, of course all the Linuxes, Yum and apt. They're our main ones. Zipper for SUSE.
So you don't have to be on a Rackspace or Amazon to utilize this. If you have, like, say you're a retail store, you have 10,000 cash registers out there, you want to safely update them.
Yep.
That's what you utilize. So you're not tied to anybody's cloud. You're in a private cloud, you can be anywhere. As long as it's got an IP address, you're there, right?
Yep, pretty much.
You could have 1,000 hardware servers with actual metal.
Yeah, and a lot of people do. Obviously a lot of people nowadays are using cloud services, but I'd still say it's, about 50-50 users. Like Rackspace, obviously they're touching bare metal. They're deploying their cloud software to it, but that's actually running on bare metal systems that they talk to. So yeah, if you're, you got a bunch of point of sale systems out there that talk SSH, like an IBM systems
With PowerShell.
PowerShell now, yeah. You've got a Windows-based POS. Yeah, so guys, I can.
You got about an hour to go, so plenty of demos.
And if you don't have the handler, somebody can go write it themselves. They go Python, right?
Yep.
All right, you JSON, or they can do the rest thing.
And there's a lot of hammers out there, so.
Big hammers?
Hmm?
Big hammers?
No, what I'm saying is that the 220 core modules,
Oh, okay.
those are the core modules. That's not all of the other fun stuff. So there's a Zoom right here. So we can zoom all the way out. Yeah, it is. You have to roll it forward, I guess.
Make sure everybody can see that shell. So I have a couple of VMs running on here. I can. So yeah, so I can go out like an example of the command, the ad hoc command. So I have a passwordless SSH set up. You can have it ask passwords. If your passwords are use a passphrase, which if you're doing in production, obviously you recommend. Just have it going through SSH agent, so you don't have to type in the passphrase every time. You can have it prompt you for it by using the -K or dash. It'll ask you for the password. I can trace back some of this slightly. So let's say we want to install something on here. So let's do the apt module and the arguments. Name something.
NTP.
NTP? Yeah, probably already installed it. State and present is the default, but it's always good to make sure you specify for sure. Didn't change it. It's already installed. If you just want to run commands, if you leave the module portion off, it will default to the shell module. So I'm going to go out and touch all my servers. It's going to fail on quite a few because I don't have a lot of my servers turned on. Sitting there waiting for SSH to time out. You can specify the parallelism you wanted to run this in as well with the the forks option. So if you wanted to, like Rackspace, I believe they run it with 500 forks simultaneously. With SSH, depending on whether, I don't know how many people are familiar with kind of the low-level SSH working, but control persist, that option, it basically leaves your command channel open to the server, so you don't have to go about multi-thread. Kind of not really, it's basically just, it leaves the socket open. So it doesn't have to go through the SSH negotiation again. That way, first time you connect, it's slow. Second time, it's lightning fast. And you set timeout how long you want that to stay on.
It's like an advanced remember me.
Kind of, yeah.
And that's basically the replacement for Firewall, right?
That, it depends. So Accelerate was the replacement for Firewall. Accelerate basically used 0MQ. People are familiar with that. 0MQ is a very, very lightweight message passing library. It's got support for tons of programming languages. With Accelerate mode, which was really the replacement for Firewall, we went to essentially doing things over a raw socket and also using the PyCrypto Keysar, which is again the Google library that they created to manage the encryption of those messages back and forth. So the first time you go out with Accelerate, it contacts it via SSH, starts a Python daemon running on that system with a key, so it's done encrypted with an AES key, and then later on, as you connect to it, you do it over a raw socket that it opens, and it's a shared private key at that point. So it's, again, you don't have to deal with the SSH overhead.
It's only implementation.
Yeah, it's ephemeral. It times out with no activity in 30 minutes. And you basically have to, it will forget the key after that point.
First, with persist control, you're just leaving an SSH session up.
Control persist, the default is 30 seconds. It will close that control channel after 30 seconds if there's no traffic.
So it isn't.
So there's still a little bit of SSH overhead when you do control persist because you still have to go through the authentication. If you've got a slow PAM library, it might still take a few seconds. Say you're using Python or Winbind or something like that. It's going out and talking, or LDAP, some centralized authentication. It could still be a little bit slow because it's got to re-authenticate you. But beyond that, it's basically, it gets rid of the TCP handshake and some of the SSH negotiation that goes on. We also did something called pipelining mode. So in older versions of Ansible, it essentially would upload the Python file and then over a new connection execute that Python module. With pipelining mode, it basically reduced the back and forth from 6 back and forths down to 3. So with control persist on and pipelining, it's about as fast as doing a raw socket connection with Accelerate. So at some point in the future, we haven't made both of those ubiquitous for Ansible because RHEL 6 doesn't support control persist yet. We're still on a slightly older version of OpenSSH. So you can't do it. We still use the Paramico library there because doing it over regular SSH is a bit slow. Paramico is faster than going over raw SSH on RHEL 6.
Is there any better way of basically degrading to unaccelerated SSH than try and run something with your accelerate transport, and if it fails, try and run your SSH transport? Is that pretty much the way you have to do it?
You can switch the transport really easily. It's just the -C, so by default it's SSH, but say for some reason I wanted to use Paramico on this system, I would change it that way. You can set the default transport in Ansible CFG.
Well, I mean, let's say that I'm connected to any of those that is there any case in which I connect to those to have a connection that indicates whether or not it's for acceleration probably not?
Right, so you'll get an SSH error saying that control persist. So actually, when you back up, control persist is actually kind of dependent on the system you're running Ansible from. It's not dependent on SSH, it's actually out there on the system. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. So if you've got a really old SSH out there, it doesn't matter if you're running it in the system.
Your Ansible.
Yeah, because that magic happens all on the controlling node side.
Okay.
So that's typically not an issue, but there are still a lot of people out there running Ansible from Ubuntu. I don't think Ubuntu 12. I think 12.04 does. There are still people out there running Ubuntu 10.04, and that did not support control persist either. And then obviously a lot of people are running RHEL 5 and RHEL 6 still. RHEL 7 just came out, so pretty common to have a system that they're running Ansible from that still doesn't support control persist. Rackspace is actually on, I think, Debian Sarge, or not Sarge, so it's the one after that, for some of their systems.
Squeeze?
It might be Squeeze.
Yeah, Squeeze is in long-term support.
Yeah, so that I don't think supports control persist either. It's basically RHEL 5 level SSH. So it happens, but they use Accelerate quite a bit because Rackspace uses Accelerate. And a lot of the testing I did was with one of their guys that was hitting those 5,000 servers at a time. So yeah, one of the ways, I don't know if people might be interested in this, I kind of mentioned it earlier, the way Ansible works is it actually takes a chunk of Python code, templates it with the variables in it, uploads it to the server, and then executes it. After it's done running, it actually deletes it from that remote server too, so it doesn't leave anything behind that you don't want it to. You can tell it to by setting an environment variable actually. And you can run your Ansible command. And it will actually, you can say you have a module, something you're trying to do that's not working for some reason, you want to debug it, you can actually have it leave the Python file out there. It'll be in the home directory of the user. And you can then go out there and run that Python file manually and stick print statements or EPDB breakpoints in there and debug it that way and send us a bug fix. Hopefully.
No, it's a feature.
It's not sometimes.
Does anyone have any demonstrations of something they'd like to see? That way we can put Jimmy on the spot here.
Also,
do you have anybody using this like, when Microsoft always comes out with Patch Tuesday, and instead of having their everybody's computer
Actually, there's
roll
a
out,
OpenSSL rollout. You want to talk about that?
oh yeah, obviously, OpenSSL, they just came out with a laundry list of vulnerabilities. So when the Heartbleed bug came out, there were lots and lots of people showing on Ansible, showing on like Twitter, other social media sites, just how easy it was to go out and upgrade OpenSSL across all their systems with a 5-minute command that they ran. So they don't have to do very much.
It's a very good reason to keep an ad hoc playbook around so that you can just say, upgrade this on all my servers so I'm not vulnerable. A CYA module, is that right?
Yes.
So upgrading for Heartbleed essentially boiled down to this. So make sure,
However many you can have to configure.
yeah, because all is every server that's in that inventory.
Can you help me out with OpenSSL? Just have to give it a help to restart it then too, and get that far into it? Or?
Yes. So yeah, that's a good point. So write a quick playbook. So we want to do it on Reichardt. Skip back gathering because it's an extra step. We don't need it necessarily. Say these are servers that might have HTTP. OpenSSL didn't really affect OpenSSH, so it depends on the server you had. If you had something like Apache, then you would have to
Just yum update mod SSL.
yeah. So if we wanted to write, I'll just write this for Ubuntu. If we wanted to, I could write it to be kind of cross-platformy, using facts and other stuff like that. Here's your handler. The name that you notify just needs to match the name that you set on this line. Actually, if we,
What did you say the dash was?
it's a list. So this is a list of items. So at the very top level, you have a list of plays. So this is a play. And then within each play, you have a certain set of options that you specify. The tasks and handlers here are the most important. Usually, you have a minimum in your playbook is tasks. You might just have a bunch of roles listed there and no tasks. So this is a play is basically a dictionary, Python terms or a hash, depending on which programming term you're familiar with. And then inside here, tasks, which is a member of that hash for play, is a list of tasks. And then each task is itself a dictionary. So just lists and dictionaries essentially. So we can then change the host. I only want this to do this on my Ubuntu hosts, which inventory, my default inventory here. This is the INI syntax we have. You can specify variables for it. You can see this is, I have a parent group called Ubuntu, and the children of that group are these other servers that have other groups. So this is a group of groups, and then Ubuntu 12.04, all the servers in there. You can do things.
That's your grouping file, and you have multiple group files.
Yep. So I could, everything that's Ubuntu 12.04, if I just want to go blanket Ubuntu, or if I want to get everything, doing groups and groups. INI syntax isn't always the best for that. If you're doing anything with a whole bunch of groups, I'd recommend writing an inventory script for it, or using one of the ones we have. We have Red Hat Satellite inventory script, for example, so you can pull all your inventory out of Satellite. So just turn off the velocity a bit. It's going to fail on some of them.
Do you want to just verse up those?
What's that?
Take that CentOS down and verse up the other differences?
Yeah, sure. Vagrant. Too much vagrant.
Hmm?
Too much vagrant. Started pretty fast. You can see the default parallelism that we have is pretty conservative at 5, but you can see it's basically going out and doing all 4 that I have listed there at once.
You're a particular user, are you registered to your databases and do things? Are you authorized, levels of authorization to do that?
How do you mean?
How do I know that you did it instead of me doing it?
So I have the it's SSH keys for this. You can specify which user remotely you want to connect as. So if you have, I could have the James C user, the J Cammarata user on those servers, and then that user would have sudo permissions. You would then see things in the var log secure or
Well, is there something in the logs that tell me that you're the guy that gave this command to these servers?
Just regular system logs. On the control server, since it's centralized, Ansible doesn't really log anything locally. That's what Tower.
It won't log a failure or.
Oh, it does log failures. As you can see right here, it actually failed here. It failed updating those 2 servers.
Well, I mean, that's what's printed, but I mean, does it
Yes, yes.
log on?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily write anything to a log file that you don't want. You could redirect this output. but it doesn't log anything.
So multiple people can get onto the Ansible server, you registered some guys to it. Somebody does something, is there a way of telling which guy on the Ansible server?
You would have to do that through regular user access control. If you don't, a lot of people would have a centralized team account. At that point, even without Ansible, you'd have trouble seeing which user did what on the system. Short of looking at the originating IP that they connected as, you tie that back to their workstation.
So a given user on the Ansible server logs onto the Ansible product, does stuff, and logs on.
Sure, if you have something like a Bastion host, you could have Ansible be tied to a system account, and then users would then have to sudo to that system account. You could then tie, again, with regular logs, which PTS they were connecting as, which one ran that command via sudo, or if you need really deep auditing, that's what Tower was designed for. It was designed for people that have lots of larger teams that you need strict auditing.
Any way of telling that script you just copied? Any way of telling who did it?
It depends. Again,
You can configure logging and check some standard out. You can even create a command alias and have all standard out copied off to someplace.
yeah, and then the other thing I was going to suggest is basically all of these events get reported via a callback mechanism, which is pluggable. We pretty much only have 2 callback mechanisms right now, but if you wanted to write your own callback mechanism that, say, uploaded those results to a database with a user at random, you could write that. We don't currently have that in the core product.
However, you said that there's work ongoing for gross ratio, because presumably, once you have that, I would then do a single sign-on sort of environment where then you've got multiple users each running Ansible themselves with 8% capabilities. They're also associated with capabilities of machine management. So it feels like that would be something to do.
Yeah.
Individually ownable, group-based, or role-based management, if that's where you want to go.
Yeah, if you really want to lock it down, have all of the remote servers that you're managing have user accounts for all of your users, and then basically make them run all of their playbooks through sudo, which you can do. And then you would just, with like any other Unix Linux-based system, you would audit that through sudo. Similarly, with Windows, that would go to your event logs, that was the user that was connected as and executed something via an administrative, run as command.
And so, I'm making what I think is a reasonable assumption that there will be a flag for doing something that's semi-privileged non-users as well. And can I do sudo-u from my Ansible that I get Ansible as a fairly unprivileged user I want to exclusively as a service
Yeah.
user?
So, say I was connecting as a non-privileged user.
Yeah, that. Or sudo-user Apache.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and then your remote user would sudo switch privileges or essentially do sudo-u. You can also use su. That way, we support both. And then that, like I said, would go to your regular Unix security logs, and then figure for auditing, you're using something like Splunk or some other centralized syslog management system if you need to have that on available.
I've got 10,000 platforms scattered across. And say that it's it's all in one box. It's got a firewall, it's got a SIP server in it. And my contract comes up, and I want to change the whole configuration of that system as far as the application software. And I want to put a different firewall on it, different one, let's say yeah. I also want to put on a different SIP server because I'm utilizing, my contract came up now. I'm going with level 3 instead of level crossing. You use this to do something like that? That made it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of an involved example, but you know, for you want to typically with OS you don't have too many firewall options. They all have their kind of single flavors. They don't have too much variability there. OpenBSD has FreeBSD had PF. Linux you have either tables or firewall D. So yeah, let's say your contract's up and you want to switch from Apache to Nginx or something like that. Yeah, then you would just, you know. So for this, we'd say. Need to notify because we're moving it. So Apache, now you're running Nginx.
Is there a mechanism, since I didn't see at the beginning of the talk, of knowing what's on each server before you go ahead and do an update? So in other words, like, I'm not trying to by any way push satellite, but you know, you can view what's there and then, you know, select what you want updated, you know, what server you want updated, which one you may not for some reason.
Right.
Do you have a visualization?
Well, I think your inventory would separate that, wouldn't it?
Right. But,
Your inventory would separate out, don't upgrade these, upgrade these.
yeah, but I think what what you need more is like knowing that these servers have Apache on them, these servers have Nginx on them already. No, there's currently nothing like that. You could run simple ad hoc commands to figure it out, but it's not. Pretty much most of the configuration management systems, you define a state that you want to be in, and then the tool will put it in that state.
The only reason I asked the question is because, you know, with almost any customer, you may have, let's say, several hundred machines that can all take the update, and then maybe 2 or 3 no for some reason can't. But you'd also like a visualization to see, you know, in a heartbeat. Once you get, you just write the code.
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to have a little bit of foreknowledge of the systems. But if you wanted to do that, we do support some logical operations. So that logic system right there, that logical construct right there says all those hosts, but not the database servers.
You know, I got 10,000 resource platforms out there. I saw this behavior open work. I change, you know, I change SIP providers to get a contract, whatever. I can set this up so it can go out and insert and delete an XML file, configuration file.
Sure. There's a couple ways of doing that. Typically, you would do that with the template module. Template that out so that basically, you know, you can store your SIP endpoints in a variable file, and then you just change a variable file, rerun it, and it will update the template with your SIP endpoints.
Okay. So let me take a step further then. And could you write a module then, so after you reconfigure to a new SIP provider, restart the free switch and check and make sure that it does register properly in the SIP provider?
Yeah, so you would do that with a handler.
Okay.
And you might want to have it, depending on how much checking you want to have it do, you could have it execute a remote script to test the connectivity and make sure that everything is up and running.
Like for a RESTful thing, hey, call this number.
Sure.
And things like that.
Yeah, you would have to probably write the script to do that. I don't think we have any SIP modules currently.
But yeah, you could write if there's a library out there that lets you talk SIP, definitely, or just some other command line to test utility to test your connectivity. Asterisk or open switch ships.
The free switch and Asterisk, so they have an API you can just talk to, see if it's registered.
Yeah, so yeah, you could do, if it's REST, you actually use, we have a module called get URL. Just do it that way.
So I guess you have to be aware of what you're updating or of what you're going to be upgrading to make backup of anything.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
things like the template module do take params like that. It will make a backup of the file before it replaces it with a new template.
Can you also, I mean, is there a designation on the backup that makes it? In other words, how do you recognize your backup?
It does a
Or
timestamp.
Pardon?
It timestamps it, and it takes the file name, adds a timestamp to it, and leaves it in that same directory permanently. It's actually one of the things we were talking about for 1.8 is to move those backups to a centralized directory, like somewhere in var that you can find them a bit easier rather than having cluttering up, whatever directory they're in.
Consider doing this kind of IDS, using this for like intrusion detection?
It depends. I mean, I would probably use this to deploy IDS systems.
Right.
Something like you could do this in a kind of tripwire kind of way too, where basically you could.
You could view probably a few files.
Right. So we do support check mode. So basically, I think that I forget, I don't use it very often, but -- check, it basically goes out and will tell you what has changed. So you've got a whole bunch of critical config files, and you want to make sure that none of them will change. You could do this. There's also
Does it check by what? Is it timestamp or is it an MD5?
It does everything for the module. If certain modules support check mode, others don't. Most of the ones in core do. Things like the shell and command modules don't support check mode, they'll assume that the command or shell or script will have executed, so it'll tell you it changed and check mode, whatever it does. It won't actually run the script, it will just say, yeah, I ran this, like it will. If it supports check mode, the module will do everything up to the point where it would actually make the change, and then just say, yeah, I changed. Yeah, actually, now that you mention it, I think there is a way you could do this. So, again, do hosts. And now, okay, say there's a whole bunch of files I want to validate. We do this is doing kind of Jinja or JSON syntax here. So okay, we're going to do that, and the last node MD5. We know this should be, it should be that MD5. So we use the stat module, basically like doing file stat. We're going to do something here. This is a loop. Since this is an array, I can loop over the array. That's how we address it. Since the name of that entry in the dictionary is path, we just say item.path. And then we're going to register the result, which basically we say store, the module returns JSON. We're going to store that returned JSON in this variable, which essentially comes in as a Python data structure. Use the assert module, asserting that. this could get a little tricky. I'd have to work on this, but essentially you could come in and then with assert. I'd have to do this with the sequence. Yeah, this one could be a little tricky, but I think you could do this. The stat will actually return MD5 sum in the results. This would get a little tricky with items, so just to show what it would look like without looping. So if you had a ton of files, you'd want to write this to do the loop.
As far as security for your connectivity, it's just SSH and user authentication.
Yeah. So you could go out and validate that certain files match what you expect them to. You could come down and basically write another playbook that went out and grabbed all this data for you, stored it in a database somewhere, or then use a lookup plugin to pull that out, or there's a lot of different ways you could tackle this.
Okay. I figured it looked like a very.
Does it offer any sort of rollback plan, or do you have to create your own?
Rollback is manual right now. You have, if you get a failure, you have to basically take care of it with an ad hoc command or another playbook. But
so for a sequence of commands that a sequence of commands to go with multiple entry points and
yeah,
where you fail.
Yeah, kind of. Depends on where it failed. You could, like I said, that stat, or basically a lot of the commands like the template command. If you say backup yes, the return result will have the name of the backup file in it. So you can then go back through your output and grab the name of that file and say, use the copy module to copy this back. Typically, if the template module would fail, it wouldn't change it. But if, say, you pushed out an updated config that had bad data in it, more often than not, you would typically correct the issue in the playbook that failed. Like using your example of the open switch config, like you have one of your variables set incorrectly, the wrong endpoint. You would just fix the variable file and rerun it.
When you're on your command line, how many characters do you use an escape character to continue on to the next line, or how do you deal with that?
Both. For an ad hoc command, it's as much as your shell will permit, so type of command as long as you want. I believe if you do, so there's two different shell modules essentially to run raw commands. One is the command module, which is safer. It doesn't allow things like redirects or any of the shell specific syntax. With the shell module directory, you can do all of that. So you could do this. It's not like it's no, so okay, so it doesn't work with ad hoc command. That's what it did, but you could write a playbook to do it.
You put regular expressions in the template.
Yeah, it depends on what you're doing. Some of it depends if the module uses it. So things like the line and file module, which allows you to go out and basically tweak a streamable line in a file. If you've used Aegis with Puppet, it does the same thing. You can specify regex that you're matching in that file to go out and change. So you could say go out in every file that starts with host or whatever, replace every occurrence of that with this string. So I'll just do the short. I'll do the whole thing. So the YAML line continuation is that. Or actually this, because we want to preserve new lines on every line. Yeah, let's do localhost. Here I'm specifying the transport. It's localhost. I don't want to SSH to the system I'm on. Local transport just means run it directly. Basically does the same thing as that local _ action I showed earlier. That's all the output from standard out. You can see at the very beginning of it, it ran the who am I. No, that's the command it ran. So there's the output of the So that's how you do multi-line commands. And we'll preserve all the new lines across each one. Shell module, you can tell it. So it ran at that time. Ran again. Line. I have something off there. It should run that second time. So yeah. Questions?
Are there any other demonstrations of fun things like?
Can you get the authorized keys, key options to work? I cannot get that to work at all. So in the authorized keys file, you want to say, no forwarding, no port forwarding.
Right.
I can't get it to work every time I put the options in. It just would place them.
Just prefix it.
There were some bugs with that in some of the older versions.
Yeah, I've got 1.7 installed now.
Okay.
So I've still got the same problem.
It's probably an SSH problem, isn't it?
No. So basically, there's an authorized keys module that you can specify what the key data, and you can add the options to it. It tries to validate the keys, but the authorized keys format is kind of tricky to figure out because some options can be quoted. Sometimes, if there are spaces in there, if there's spaces in the quotes, it's okay, but not if there's spaces between the options. So it's hard. So yeah, if you're still having, you can template it out just the way people do it with authorized keys, but the authorized keys module should be able to handle it. If you're seeing behavior that's broken, definitely open it up with us and take a look at it, because we thought we had knocked out all of the problems that we got with that.
Because I just tried to add, like, what's in the example. So, where key options, port forwarding, host equals 10.0.0, whatever. So that it just comes back.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that one after we kind of break. I'll take a look and see if
I was just trying to get the example that they showed in the documentation actually do it, so I could see.
Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at that. Might be a bug. Like I said, there were problems with that through 1.5 and 1.6. People kept finding corner cases that broke our parsing of that line. But yeah, just a quick, this is Galaxy. This is the role sharing site. So you can come in here and get roles, categories. So this, the first one, this is a role that installs a Zabbix agent for monitoring. Ever use Zabbix? Pretty good. So right here, this is the command to install it. Just take this right over to my shell.
Is that where you go for descriptions of these modules?
No, so this is a role. This is basically a package that somebody has written to do something on your systems using all sorts of other modules.
So I mean, is that what they describe to you what the package does?
Yeah, so scroll down a little further. This is the documentation on this one is not very good. Oh, there's a problem. There you go. It's got a bit of documentation on this one. So it's got there's pretty good documentation on this one.
Yeah.
The other one, not so good. I guess he figured it was pretty self-explanatory. Documentation on what all of the modules do is here. So say I want to see all the options for the Yum module. These are all the options you can pass the Yum modules. You manage your packages.
Does it deal well with multiple versions and multiple instances on the server?
Multiple instances of packages? Packages? Or
Yeah, any particular package.
It depends. Some package managers allow it, others don't. Things like pip or cpan allow multiple versions. Things like Yum don't. So it depends on the package manager. If the
Yum does, but you gotta deal with it.
Does it?
I believe so.
I wasn't aware that you had multiple versions.
Well, you just gotta install it somewhere else.
You can change your prefix.
Yes. If you have it in a different RPMDB. I don't think we manage that. That's a rare case that people
Okay, just curious.
have things managed in
Every once in a while, you'll find developers developing across 2 or 3.
One thing that Michael, the head, talks about quite a lot is that Ansible follows a lot of best practices. And so if you want to create the snowflake bad idea, it's not really going to help
you can't help what developers want.
Yeah.
Or have to do, maybe that's the best.
Certainly for some of those cases, I would expect to see people resorting to the shell command modules to do things manually like that. If they really wanted, they could basically fork essentially the Yum repo or create an RPM module,
Right.
Or the Yum module, or create an RPM. Like we have a D package, we don't have an RPM module itself. Actually, I think somebody had submitted a D package module and we rejected it because we didn't want people messing with the low level ugliness of individual things like that.
I've even seen on servers where you have to have Perl for some packages and Perl for other things that are different versions.
Yeah, Perl 5
for
versus
other
Perl 6 or Python 2 versus Python 3. Typically with those, you would not install, it depends. So something like Red Hat, you'll have like on older systems, you had the Python 2.6 package, which you could install and basically put everything in its own unique location, right, unique package. And then the regular Python package was Python 2.4. Or even on some systems that have Python 2.7 by default, you can install Python 2.6 with the older version. So yeah, it all depends, like I said, on the system and package maintenance underlying as well.
Will it install cars and stuff like that?
Yes, we have the on archive module. that's in one of these. We don't consider that a package, but it's in. We have that in system. It's in here somewhere.
It's all right, you answered the
Yeah.
question.
Is there any way to guarantee that you can't have a system just with two different Ansible servers?
We could,
That could happen.
yes.
So, two different
You
Ansible
could
servers.
have two
Could
admins
register,
stepping on each
so
other's feet.
it's your responsibility to make sure you don't have like a lock or something that says, oh, we can't put this in control, we registered as an Ansible client to somebody else, you better find out who.
You don't have any central registration or anything like that. So
I don't care about central registration, it says that they're already an Ansible. You're already,
That's a common.
yeah, you're already applying to some Ansible server. You say, oh, wait a minute. So-
right, there's no association like that.
Okay.
Like it's not like satellite where if you connect from one system, it thinks its master is now this controlling node versus this one.
Okay, so you can have two different Ansible servers, the same client, walking over each other.
Well,
Yeah.
no, you could have them broken up doing different things. One Ansible spitting out monitoring completely, and then another doing after deployment.
Yeah,
So-
you could have your ops team doing things related to the applications or operations side of things versus your, Linux admin team doing some more low-level stuff on it. So
Going back to the tar, does, you have to write your own YAML script in order to deal with cleanup afterward?
if you wanted to remove,
And that's another question, if you're installing third-party software, are you doing check on disk space and so forth?
it's something you would do on your own.
You can put
verify-
ifs in there.
Yeah, you certainly could. I mean, so say you had a fact that one of the facts is this left. Say unarchive this when Ansible SDK/1/free space is greater than 500 megabytes. So you know that you have enough free space to it. The onArchive module just onarchives. If you then say had like a setup script or something like installation script inside that you ran afterwards to install it, you would then come back with another module to clean that file. A lot of people just on tar archive of source code or whatever, like we used to do. Our Drupal installs that way. We essentially untar a file into a directory and then change the symlink, like the latest symlink to point to that new code. That's how we did it. And then if we had to roll back, we just change the symlink back to a previous version. So with Ansible, that version would just be, if you were doing it with a Git repository or a tar directory, you just do it.
Is anybody trying to write a web interface for SAM?
I think there have been one or two other people that basically kind of rolled their own open source versions of kind of what Tower does.
Oh, is that what Tower does?
Yeah, that's what Tower does. Tower manages running all of those remotely, all those playbooks with a nice GUI. There were one or two other people. It's open source. People are free to do that. Yeah.
Your mention of symlinks suggests this to me. Is there already a module integrated with the Unix packaging system?
Sorry?
Do you know the Unix packaging system? So,
I have not seen that.
it's
NixOS.
So NixOS, or you don't actually have to run the entire system overnight, but you can run the packaging stuff. It's a Git-based, keeps opaque caches of everything installed, and it is beautiful and terrifying.
Yeah. If you're talking about NixOS.
I
I was actually thinking about giving a presentation.
Yeah,
But it's
Are-
almost like what he's doing here, putting everything, bare bones out.
Are you using NixOS to manage?
No, but I thought it would be
Okay.
great. No, it'd be great for perhaps cloud services, and have a GUI written.
Yeah, I agree, but on the other hand, I'm not sure I want to see iMac down that far. And
Yeah, that sounds really similar to how Go manages its
Well,
library.
What's nice about it is you can install bare bones exactly what you want to install for an OS. And then two, config files are all, how do you want to say it?
they're all managed from Git, so you have, a lot. So it's Git artifacts plus symlink forms. So effectively, you have a sort of time capsule like way of rolling back the system to prior states at any point. And
Well, and it's all managed through Grub, so actually every time you make a change, isn't it, it just puts down a new bill.
Grub entries.
Yeah, it's a new bill.
Essentially revert to.
Yeah, you just go back to the previous one and you're back to the best.
Yeah, you could write a module to manage.
But
that
as far as you
package.
know, no one has yet.
No,
Okay.
not as far as I can see.
It sounds really interesting, and supposedly the authors of the papers that came up with this idea, it's actually much cleaner than almost any system out there, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot less.
After dealing with both Debian's format and RPM's not too bad, but it can be kind of bad. Anything that's better is always welcome.
Yeah, but there's still the occasional rogue package out there that'll destroy something.
Yeah.
That will.
All of them can just go out and do their own thing. Fedora is not too bad. They have pretty strict rules for their packages and keep control of it. I've found Ubuntu is way worse. There is no standard for packaging on that OS.
I just see with Fedora, I'll go through 2 or 3, let's say 14, 15, and 16 work fine. Then all of a sudden 17 and 18, if all hell breaks loose,
Yeah.
you never get a stable system.
It can. Fedora's, I thought it's been pretty good. Ubuntu, so like.
And it could be what platform it's
Right.
on.
The thing that drives me crazy about Ubuntu is the standard of do you install a service? Do you start it from the package management or not? Completely hit or miss with Ubuntu packaging. They don't have a guideline on that as to whether or not you do or do not start the service and enable it to run it. Whereas Fedora,